Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so glad you are joining us for this one. Imagine a trauma surgeon walking into an emergency resuscitation room.
Oh, yeah. A critically injured patient has just arrived, and it's chaos.
Exactly. The
Mhm.
monitors are screaming, there is blood everywhere, the junior staff are tense, and the clock is just relentlessly ticking down.
It's a highly pressurized environment.
Right. And you would expect the surgeon to rush, to bark orders and scramble, but they don't. They do the exact opposite.
They actively slow down.
They really do. They step into that chaos and impose absolute methodical structure. And today we are exploring a really fascinating premise from our source document.
Yes, the document is called Series 3, What a DSL Can Learn from a Trauma Surgeon.
And a DSL, for those who might not know, is a designated safeguarding lead in a school or pastoral environment.
Right, the person responsible for child protection and well-being.
So our mission today is to deconstruct how these principles of trauma care can fundamentally transform the way you manage a crisis.
Moving from overwhelming panic to structured, precise action.
Okay, let's unpack this because, on its face, mapping the clinical, sterile world of a hospital to the messy, dynamic reality of a school it seems pretty weird, right?
It does seem like a stretch at first glance. It's a radical way to look at pastoral care.
Definitely. But the magic here is in the operational mindset.
Exactly. The fundamental connection the author makes is really about the architecture of a crisis.
Right.
Because whether you are dealing with a physical trauma in an ER or, say, a deeply complex safeguarding disclosure from a student on a random Tuesday afternoon,
The environmental pressures are nearly identical.
they really are. You face multiple competing demands, sky-high emotional volatility, and severe time constraints. The environment is basically engineered to induce panic.
Which brings us to this biological reality in trauma care known as the golden hour.
Ah, yes, the golden hour.
It's that immediate window following an injury where early, correct intervention drastically improves survival rates. If you delay or fumble that initial response, the risk just multiplies exponentially.
And the source argues that safeguarding has a nearly identical mechanism.
Which is wild to think about.
It is, but understanding the mechanics of that golden hour in a pastoral setting completely changes how professionals operate.
So what does that actually look like for a DSL?
Well, imagine a sudden disclosure occurs. Say, a severe physical abuse allegation happens literally just as the final school bell rings.
Oh, wow. Worst possible timing.
Exactly. The risk profile of that child spikes instantly. And in those first 60 minutes, the actions the safeguarding lead takes will dictate the entire trajectory of the case.
So it's about how the child is spoken to, what immediate safety barriers are put in place.
Right, and how accurately the initial information is captured.
Because the natural human instinct in that moment is to just try and fix the entire problem immediately.
Absolutely. You hear something terrible, and your brain screams that you need to resolve the trauma, counsel the family, and, ensure long-term well-being all at once.
But the strategic reframe the source offers is that your goal in the golden hour is absolutely not to do everything.
No, it's not. Your goal is to do the right things first, correctly.
I love that. Do the right things first, correctly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that reframe requires an immense amount of professional discipline.
Because it's hard to hold back.
It is. But trying to fix the underlying chronic complexities of a student's life during a crisis spike actually endangers the student.
Right. If you spread your focus too thin trying to solve, the family dynamics.
You might miss the critical immediate step of ensuring that child doesn't get on the bus to go back to a dangerous house that afternoon.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the mechanism for figuring out what to do first is triage.
Yes.
Triage is everything.
And I think we often misunderstand triage as just making a list, but it's much more brutal than that. I was thinking about it like juggling 10 falling plates.
Okay, I like that analogy.
You can't catch them all. So you have to instantly decide which ones are priceless fine china and which are cheap plastic. And you have to actively choose to let the plastic drop for now. That is exactly it. Or think of it like a computer's processor, the RAM.
Oh, right.
When a computer's CPU gets completely overloaded with demands, it doesn't try to run every program equally until the whole system crashes.
It intentionally kills background tasks.
Exactly. It deliberately stops running non-essential programs to keep the core operating system alive. Triage is the conscious, active choice to let certain things drop.
Wow. So in a safeguarding context, killing those background tasks means identifying the immediate acute risk and actively deferring the lower level concern.
Yes. Is the child safe tonight?
Yeah.
That is your operating system right now.
And the referral for long-term behavioral support.
That's a background app. Ongoing mediation with a difficult parent, background app. You don't delete them forever, but you deliberately shut them down for the next hour.
Which means you have to be comfortable with the discomfort of unresolved issues.
You do. And the text makes it clear that this kind of triage is a hard-won professional skill. Not all issues have the same urgency, even if they all carry the same emotional weight.
But that brings up a huge logistical wall, right? We can sit here and talk about the theory of prioritizing the operating system.
But how do you physically execute that when your adrenaline is absolutely flooding your system?
Exactly. I mean, my heart rate would be through the roof.
And that is the core friction of the job. Adrenaline degrades our executive function. It narrows our vision and makes us highly reactive.
So how does a trauma surgeon do it?
Well, they don't overcome adrenaline by just being a naturally calmer person. They overcome it through rigidly enforced structure.
Structure prevents chaos.
Precisely. The environment must be structured to force precision. In a trauma bay, roles are so clearly defined that no one is guessing who is securing the airway and who is pushing the IV.
Because chaos in the environment cannot lead to chaos in the response.
Right.
If the student is panicking, the teacher who brought them in is panicking, and the parent on the phone is panicking, the safeguarding team has to be the circuit breaker.
The system itself has to provide clarity. The disclosure procedures must be practically muscle memory.
So the pastoral team needs designated roles.
Yes. Who is taking the verbatim notes?
Yeah.
Who is cross-referencing the child's file for historical context? Who is handling the perimeter?
Wait, the perimeter? What does that mean in a school?
It means keeping the rest of the school running so the lead can focus entirely on the disclosure without interruptions.
Oh, that makes so much sense. But I have to push back on one of the operational recommendations the source makes here.
Okay, go for it.
It heavily emphasizes that precision matters more than speed, and it tells practitioners to slow down their thinking.
Right.
Honestly, if you have a student in your office who is at severe risk, and social services close their intake line in 45 minutes, slowing down feels completely reckless, you have an incredibly narrow window to act.
I get that.
So how do you justify taking your foot off the gas?
Because speed without precision in a complex system actually creates devastating delays. Think about the mechanics of a referral to an external agency. If you rush that phone call, if you haven't taken 10 minutes to properly map out the timeline, separate fact from assumption, and structure your evidence.
The person on the other end of the line receives a garbled, confusing narrative.
Exactly. And what happens then?
They reject it because it doesn't meet their threshold for intervention.
Yes. Your rushed action resulted in a failed intervention. The illusion of speed is dangerous.
Wow.
Taking those extra minutes to ground yourself, gather the precise data, and formulate a clinical, objective report feels like an eternity when the adrenaline is pumping. But that methodical precision is what actually secures the necessary intervention.
That perfectly mirrors that military phrase, slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
It really does.
If you take the time to organize the information perfectly the first time, the entire downstream process accelerates. You don't have social workers calling you back 3 times to clarify messy notes.
And you don't have to backtrack to fix systemic errors. It is the difference between being reactive and being deliberate.
But even with the most perfectly designed procedure, we hit another vulnerability, don't we? Human psychology.
Oh, absolutely. A system is entirely dependent on the humans running it, and the trauma model recognizes that individuals fail under extreme pressure.
Which is why the source is so adamant that you cannot work alone.
You really can't.
It draws a hard line here, stating that safeguarding risk increases dramatically when decisions are made in isolation. A surgeon never operates alone.
No, they rely on an entire interdependent team, anesthesiologists, nurses, technicians, to monitor their blind spots.
Yet in safeguarding, we constantly see professionals trying to shoulder the entire burden themselves.
We do. And the mechanism behind this isolation is usually a toxic mix of 2 things.
What are they?
First, a well-intentioned but misguided belief that minimizing the circle of knowledge protects the child's privacy.
Right. Keep it a secret to protect them.
Exactly. And second, a psychological phenomenon where the practitioner begins to enmesh with the child's trauma. They develop a savior complex where they feel they are the only one who can truly protect this student.
So they put on the cape and try to manage the crisis solo.
And that is when catastrophic errors occur. When you operate alone under high stress, your amygdala hijacks your prefrontal cortex.
You get cognitive tunnel vision.
Yes. You fixate on one detail of the disclosure and completely miss a massive glaring inconsistency or a secondary risk factor.
So you need a team to diffuse the responsibility.
You need a deputy to review your plan, challenge your assumptions, and spot the details your stressed brain simply deleted.
So what does this all mean for the person whose natural human reaction is deep empathy?
That's a great question.
Because diffusing responsibility and acting like a clinical processor sounds, well, incredibly cold. When a child is sitting in front of you recounting something horrific, how do you suppress the urge to emotionally spiral?
What's fascinating here is how we routinely confuse emotional mirroring with effective empathy.
Oh, interesting.
We often think that to show a child we care, we must match their emotional intensity. But calm isn't about turning off your emotions or lacking empathy. Calm is a highly strategic, functional tool.
The source states bluntly that calm is not optional.
Because if the adult in the room loses their composure, the crisis multiplies. Emotional contagion is a very real physiological process.
Right, if a child discloses a trauma, their nervous system is already severely dysregulated.
And if you react with visible outrage, or if you burst into tears out of sympathy, you've just introduced a new layer of chaos into the room.
Oh, I see. The child now has to manage your emotional response on top of their own trauma.
Exactly. They may actually shut down and stop talking out of a desire to protect you, the adult, from further distress.
Wow, they stop disclosing because the adult can't handle the data. That is a terrifying thought.
Your calm is the anchor that signals to the child's nervous system that the situation is containable. It tells them, what you were saying is terrible, but the system can hold it.
That makes total sense. You can process your own secondary trauma later, right?
Yes, in supervision with your team. But inside the golden hour, your emotional regulation is the primary mechanism for keeping the child safe.
I'm really glad we are reaching this point in the discussion because treating a school's pastoral office like a surgical theater definitely has its limits.
It does.
I mean, if we expected staff to operate with the detached, high-octane intensity of a trauma surgeon 24/7, the entire faculty would burn out in a month. They'd just turn into robots.
Which is why the author explicitly builds in a reality check. The trauma analogy is deeply effective for the peak of an acute crisis, but it breaks down when we look at the chronic nature of pastoral care.
Because safeguarding isn't a perpetual emergency room.
Exactly. We have to understand the friction between clinical protocols and human complexity.
The source outlines some really stark differences in a table. A trauma surgeon is dealing with a physical emergency in a highly controlled environment. The doors are locked, the lighting is perfect, the tools are sterile.
And the goal is an immediate, visible outcome. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the vitals. Once the patient is stabilized, they are moved out of the surgeon's care.
But compare that to a designated safeguarding lead. They are operating in a highly dynamic, porous environment.
The crisis doesn't happen in a sterile room. It happens while 3 other students are knocking on the office door and the lunch bell is ringing.
Right. And more importantly, emotional trauma isn't binary. You can't put a tourniquet on a complex family history.
No, you can't. The DSL is managing an ongoing process that might last for the student's entire educational career.
So how do you reconcile that? How do you implement a trauma-level response system for crises without, treating children like broken machines on an assembly line?
You do it by building what the source calls a high-pressure safeguarding response system.
A high-pressure safeguarding response system?
Right. It's an organizational architecture that absorbs the pressure so the individuals don't have to. It's constructed in a layered approach, moving from baseline procedures to deeply embedded cultural reflexes.
The document details this evolution through 3 tiers, doesn't it? It starts with the absolute baseline, having clear procedures.
Yes, the foundations tier. But
Okay.
a binder full of rules sitting on a shelf doesn't help anyone when a crisis hits. A school with only foundational procedures is still highly vulnerable because the staff haven't internalized the mechanisms.
Which is why the system has to evolve into developmental pathways.
Exactly. It's not just about having the rule, it's about training the staff through practical application so they feel confident.
Think about tabletop exercises in emergency management.
Yes, schools that excel at this run hypothetical scenarios with their pastoral teams. They build the muscle memory of how to coordinate, how to record, and how to communicate before the actual emergency ever happens.
So that when the real golden hour arrives, the cognitive load of what do we do next is already handled by the system.
And the staff can use all their mental energy to focus on the child's specific nuances
Yeah.
rather than trying to remember the phone number for social services.
And that leads to the final tier, the leadership layer, right? Crisis-ready systems and team coordination.
Yes. This raises an important question for you, the listener. Whether you are running a safeguarding team, managing a corporate crisis unit, or leading any high-stakes project.
What's the question?
When the pressure in your environment inevitably spikes, do your operational systems bring clarity, or do they multiply the confusion?
Oh, that is an incredible diagnostic question.
Isn't it?
Because if a crisis hits and your team immediately scatters, asking each other who is supposed to be taking notes, who is contacting the family, where the forms are, your system is actively working against you.
But if the pressure spikes and your team seamlessly clicks into predefined roles, locking down the perimeter and executing their tasks without needing to be told.
Your system is the circuit breaker.
And that is the ultimate lesson from the trauma bay. The surgeon doesn't survive the chaos of being superhuman. They survive because they trust the architecture of the response.
They know they can't do everything at once.
They lean on their team, they prioritize the critical actions, and they execute them with methodical precision.
It's like the source says, in critical moments, the right actions, done well, matter more than doing everything at once.
That principle transcends safeguarding entirely. It's the absolute core of crisis management.
When everything is falling apart, you have to identify the operating system, kill the background tasks, and act with deliberate, smooth precision.
The document leaves us with a final reflective challenge to carry forward into our own practice.
Let's hear it.
Quote, in high-pressure safeguarding moments, am I trying to do everything, or am I focusing on the actions that matter most first?
It's a question that forces a total reevaluation of how we spend our energy when the clock is ticking.
It really does.
But, as we look at all these systems, all this structured data and this obsession with precision during the golden hour, I kind of can't help but think about the fundamental limitation of the trauma model.
Oh, which is...
Well, it's entirely reactive. A trauma
Mhm.
surgeon only goes to work after the car crash has already happened. They are masters of the aftermath.
Sure.
But safeguarding is a continuous human environment. If a school or an organization actually implements this level of systemic rigor, if they are perfectly documenting these precise triage moments, capturing the exact nature of the disclosures, the times, the contextual triggers over hundreds of cases.
They are building an incredibly deep data lake.
Exactly. Could the ultimate evolution of these systems shift us out of the trauma bay entirely?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
If we take all that structured, methodical data that we gather during the golden hour, could we eventually use it to spot the behavioral precursors?
Moving from a reactive trauma response to a predictive, preventative architecture.
Right. Could we move from just surviving the crisis with surgical precision to actually predicting and intervening before the trauma ever occurs?
That is the true frontier of safeguarding right there. Utilizing the data gathered in the worst moments to map the hidden fault lines of a community.
It's definitely something for all of us to mull over, because human complexity isn't going anywhere and the pressure is only going to increase.
The real question is whether our systems are ready to absorb it.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.